project, the Southeast Supply Enhancement Project, which will serve Virginia as well. It'll serve enough natural gas to provide energy for more than 9 million homes. We need to simplify our infrastructure permitting in this country so that those sorts of projects can go in. We take great care for the environment in and around our projects and great care for our communities in and around our projects. I'll just give you one quick example. A project like the Southeast Supply Enhancement, 20 years ago, we would have spent about $10 million on environmental permitting and achieved the same result we're going to achieve today, which is a very good result. Today, we're going to spend over $100 million, and we're going to take a lot more time. So that cost is being borne by the American consumer. So if we can streamline our permitting, it'll be cheaper for the American consumer. It'll give Virginia the energy it needs, and everyone will be better off.
Agreed. Thank you. And I yield back.
Thank you very much. The chair now recognizes Representative Min for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for your testimony. So first question for you all. How many of you have taken an economics introductory class? Can you raise your hand if you have? Okay, let the record reflect all 4 raised their hands. Can you raise your hand if you're familiar and remember the concept of negative externalities or negative external costs? Only Ms. Howell's raising her hand. Mr. Tarpley looked like he was about to. Okay, just as a refresher, you may remember from Econ 101, negative externalities describe the indirect or hidden negative costs sometimes created by an economic transaction. The classic example, of course, is downstream pollution, where a factory discharges its waste into a river, which in turn creates unclean water that leads to cancer, health issues, maybe disrupts the fishing industry downstream. The negative costs of this pollution are not paid for by the factory or its consumers, but are instead costs that society bears. We might call them hidden costs. Now, offshore drilling is another textbook example of an economic activity that produces large negative externalities or hidden costs. This is not a disputed point. As we all know, burning fossil fuels releases large amounts of carbon into the atmosphere, which has created a climate crisis that we are just beginning to wrap our heads around. According to the IMF, when you factor in these hidden costs related to carbon emissions, oil production costs our society over $7 trillion a year. We're seeing these costs accrue in the form of extreme temperatures across the world, including the 140-degree temperatures we saw in India last year, biblical-level disasters like wildfires, tornadoes, hurricanes, extreme drought and flooding, and the like. And here is the thing. In 100 years, when people look back at this time, they're going to say that the 2020s were uniquely benign, uniquely cool as far as our weather patterns. Our grandkids and great-grandkids are going to look back and say that these were the good old days. We are literally damning them to hell on Earth unless we aggressively reduce our carbon emissions. The negative external costs of oil production are so large as to potentially be an existential threat to our civilization. Offshore drilling also produces other major hidden costs, which I want to briefly address. First, the threat of oil spills, which have been a recurring problem for California's coastlines over the years. In 2021, my district experienced a major oil spill off the coast of Huntington, which shut down our local coastal economy and brought outdoor recreation and tourism to a halt. And we dodged a bullet as this was a small spill of only 25,000 gallons. But here is the problem. It's increasingly becoming clear that, at least in California, the economics of offshore drilling mean it's a matter of when, not if, we will have additional oil spills. The oil rigs off our coast were built between the 1960s and 80s and are long past their shelf life. Production is in decline, and the original leaseholders have all long since sold off their leases to small wildcat companies, which have no incentive to invest meaningfully in safety and soundness. To put it simply, offshore drilling has become a ticking time bomb for our coastline. So, Mr. Tarpley, would you be surprised if I told you that California's coastal economy, our beautiful beaches and tourism and innovation that we generate, is quite valuable? Yes or no?
Yes.
You would be surprised? Okay.
I understand how valuable it is.
It produces $1.7 trillion a year in value, according to NOAA. Mr. Tarpley, I guess I'll just ask you again, would you be surprised if I told you that oil drilling off the coast of California is very minuscule by comparison?
That's correct.
That's right. Offshore oil drilling near California generates less than 0.006% of the value generated by our coastal economy. So I will just ask Ms. Howell, I'll switch to you. Do you think that the potential risks to California's coastal economy are justified by the tiny amount of oil being produced there?
No, absolutely. There's no reason. Sorry.
Now, another major hidden cost associated with offshore drilling is decommissioning costs, which I really haven't heard addressed too much here. But once these wells run dry, you have to plug them so they don't leak, dismantle the infrastructure so they don't create long-term problems. This costs a lot of money. Today, over 78% of the 2,000 plus leases in U.S. waters or outside of U.S. waters are currently idle which means the associated oil rigs are abandoned and need decommissioning. But instead of actually paying for these costs, all too often, oil companies abandon these obligations and declare bankruptcy. In the last 15 years, there have been more than 30 Chapter 11 bankruptcies of offshore operators, leaving U.S. taxpayers with $7.5 billion in liabilities. It's estimated that we have another $40 to $70 billion in further cleanup costs remaining, and these are paid for by the taxpayers. Is that not correct, Ms. Howell?
That's absolutely correct.
So I want to just close with this. You may remember that last May, Donald Trump, now the president, held a meeting with oil executives where he promised to slash environmental protections if the oil industry contributed $1 billion to his campaign. Perhaps coincidentally, in the months following, oil executives donated hundreds of million dollars to his campaign, as well as the campaign of many other Republicans campaigning on slashing our environmental regulations. This is the first hearing this committee is holding since that time. And I guess my question is, when you think about the merits, whatever you think about the merits of offshore drilling, do you think, and I'll ask this to Ms. Howell, that Americans might reasonably see this hearing as a form of corruption, where House Republicans are delivering on the pay-to-play promise that Donald Trump made last year to the oil industry?
Absolutely. The premise that we are.
I would request a point of order. I would request that the gentleman's words be taken down. I think
what
he is
basis?
I think that he has maligned every single person on this side of the aisle
I'm
in terms of
I'm
the
asking the
hearing.
witness if this
You
is a
have
reasonable
indicated
question.
that we are engaging in corruption.
No, I said, is it reasonable for
Mr.
Americans
Chairman,
to believe that,
the
based on
gentleman,
the things that we
may I
all read in the
speak?
newspapers?
The chair will
speak?
take a moment to consider.
Thank you.
The chair, after conferring, we're going to, at the moment, allow them to stand. We are going to review, those are the exact language.
Should she be allowed to answer the question? I asked her if it would be reasonable for people to assume that, the American people to assume that, or believe it.
We're out of time right now. If somebody yields your time, Mr. Min, you can do
Thank
that.
you. I yield back.
But we're going to review and make that determination as quickly as possible.
Thank you. I yield back.
The chair now